All right, had to reset my GoPro. All right, so I just got the white blur apart, took the upper intake manifold off because I'm replacing valve cover gaskets because clearly it's leaking over here on the side, and it may be hard to see, but it's leaking back here and down the back of the head onto the header, causing the smell. But also, you can see this, look at that puddle of oil accumulating there and there. Dude, right? I mean, and you can see the top of the valve cover there. See how it's wet where that leaf is, and all the way down. So the valve cover, and look right here, the bolt, the middle bolt there, see how it's all wet. So the valve cover, typically on these cars, they can leak over time. It just happens. This motor was built in 2015, so it's 8 years old since we built the motor, and it's just time to change the gaskets. But this is what happens. You'll start seeing a leak. And so what I'm gonna do on these cars, on the Fox body, you gotta pull the upper intake manifold off. Before I get too far, I'm gonna go in here and start cleaning up as much oil as I can and kind of spray that all down and get the leaf and the trash out of the way. Just get all the oil here out of the way and clean it up really good, get the dirt out of the way. Then I'm gonna take the valve cover off. And once the valve cover is off, I'll clean it up real good. I do have brand new replacement gaskets for it. They're right here, which is the Pro gasket. And that is part number 1684. And these are nice. They got the little metal inserts, so you can't over tighten it, but you don't need to just crank down on it too tight. And then because it's the Edelbrock intake, I needed to replace the intake gasket, which is basically the one here in the middle. And I'll put this new gasket on it and we should be good to go. It's always a good idea to replace the gasket when you take it off. Even though his was not torn, it's still a good idea to replace the gasket anyway when you're in there. So I'm gonna put this new gasket on there and we're gonna roll on. Okay, so stay tuned as we tear this apart and put gaskets on. All right, got the valve cover off. Just so you can check out the inner workings of this sweet engine. There's roller rockers on there. So the engine itself is clean as a pin if you check that out. And I cleaned up all the residual oil and dirt that was up there on top. Before I remove this, I'm gonna wipe off the rail there that the valve cover sits on. And once I wipe that off, I'll come over here to the valve cover. I'm gonna pull off the old gasket. Basically, I'm gonna replace it with the exact same gasket that I've got. But you can see where it's actually been pushing oil, especially at the back here. You can see how dirty it is there. That's where it's been leaking the worst, and down the back of the head there. See how dirty it is. But gonna clean that up, replace the gasket with a brand new one, and then I'll go and I'll work on the passenger side. We're gonna get this all buttoned up though and clean, and should be good to go. You can kind of see the residual oil there. I got to clean that off the back there and down the back of the head. If you can see it, I've already sprayed it. Just need to wipe it off really good. But overall, everything else looks great. The engine itself looks beautiful on the inside. And we'll go from there. All right, I have finished the driver's side. Wasn't too bad. This side's pretty easy to actually get to. Not a lot of stuff in the way. Torqued it down. They basically say snug out the right side. I like to use a torque wrench, so torqued it to 4 foot-pounds of torque. So for every 1 foot-pound, it's like 12 inch-pounds or something. So that's roughly like, 48 inch-pounds, if you will. So it's not that tight, but you know, better than just snug. Snug to some people could be snap off, you know what I'm saying? Snap off head, bolt racing. But anyway, 4 foot-pounds, starting from the middle, work your way out. Do it in sequence a couple times. So you tighten it and they go down, tighten it again, and you know, do it like 3 or 4 times. And then the final, I go around twice and make sure and it snaps. Get my torque wrench to click at 4 pounds of torque. So again, 48 inch-pounds, 4 pounds of torque, whatever you want to go with. But that side is done, cleaned up, got the oil off of it. New gasket. No silicone is needed on these gaskets. They are reusable, but these are just basically wore out. So brand new ones on that side. This side, to get to it, it's a little more involved. You you have to disconnect the fuel line. So quick disconnect tool and pull the fuel line out of the way. And then here, because the way this worm clamp was, I had to kind of really pull the valve cover away and pop it off of there. So other than that, valve cover's off, get ready to change this gasket. I did just clean up the mating surfaces really good and just cleaned up the bottom side of this one. And that's all clean now. But you'll notice how nasty this is. And I didn't really talk about it, but I did go ahead and clean that one up. You see it is a little bit cleaner than the previous look. It looked like that before. So I'm gonna scrub this down and clean up a little bit before I put it back on, just so it looks a little nicer than that. And I'll clean that real good, put the gasket on, reassemble this side, and then put the intake gasket on it. Now, some of you savvy watchers there, because I know you guys really watch this stuff. This is not the standard Edelbrock upper. This is the Performer RPM upper. It's a 7123 upper. 7233 is the actual gasket that I need for this. And if you watched me scan over here, you saw I had a 7231. Well, 7231 is exactly the gasket that I took off. And the reason there is a difference, if you see where it was crushed, see right here, the ports actually in this gasket that I took off are a little intrusive. See how the stamp from this intake, it's actually bigger, if you can see that in the light. So basically what that means is it's not gasket matched. The ports on the intake, upper and lower, are bigger than the gasket. So the gasket was smaller than what the port can flow. So is it a restriction? Sure, it's a little restriction for what it is. So basically last time this was put together, whoever put it together, they just grabbed what they had available, because the gasket for this is pretty hard to get. I just checked Edelbrock's site. It's actually out of stock. I checked around, nobody has this right now. So the one we actually had in stock today when I went to TTSaleen to get gaskets was they had the standard one on the shelf, which is this one. And that's why you'll notice it has this side cover piece, which is not part of this intake that we're working with. So it's exact replacement for what I took off. Now, I could stick it on there and it would run fine, but you know me, to extract every little single horsepower, because horsepower matters around here, I can take this gasket, the new one, and I can take a razor and I can actually cut out and just open this gasket up a little bit, because it's paper gasket. I can open it up a little bit to gasket match the ports. And the best way to do that is I can lay it up here and I can kind of draw it out and go through. And it's tedious, but I can take a very sharp razor and I can cut that out and open up the gasket, and then it'll be perfectly fine. Everything else about the gasket is identical. It's just the port are slightly smaller, as you can see there. So that's one thing I have to do. Once I get the valve cover on this side, everything will be fixed for the oil leak at the top end standpoint, and then I can put the intake on. But before I put the upper intake on it, I do need to modify this gasket, and only because I can't buy one. If I could buy one, I'd just go buy one and be done with it. But you know what? I'm just gonna modify this one and we're gonna make it work. So I'm gonna take a razor, gonna knife that out just a little bit, and we're gonna be back in business. And again, is it gonna make a huge bit of horsepower? Will you feel it in seat of the pants? No. But on the dyno, could it make a couple horsepower difference? Sure. I mean, we're talking, 5, nothing. I mean, it's not gonna be like 50 horsepower, nothing crazy like that, but could it make 5 to 10 horsepower? Sure. Will it make a difference in the boost pressure? That's a possibility, because this is actually going to change the restriction a little bit, because that is a little bit of a restriction. So it could make the difference in maybe a half to 1 pound of boost. So by opening that up, we're relieving some of the restriction in the intake and making it actually bigger and flow a little bit more. So we may see less boost now with this mod, which is perfectly fine. It just means the motor's actually more efficient and flowing, like I talked about in my other videos. It doesn't mean it's going to make any less power. It just means there'll be less restriction in it and actually run better and make more power. So, hey, look who's here now. Come on in, make a cameo. We're talking about gaskets and making more power by having to cut a gasket to fit, because I don't have the right gasket. But the right gasket wasn't on it. You want to tell them about it? No. Come on, give them your inside knowledge of automotive. No. She took auto tech in high school. Let's see what she remembers. Come on, tell them. They want to hear more about what you know in Mrs. TTSaleen world.
I just woke up from a nap.
Well, there you go. Okay, let me get back to work. Well, one razor blade. I'm halfway through this tedious task. There you go. There's the pieces I'm cutting out. See how it's more squared out here. And here's the factory side. So this is the side I haven't done. This is the side I have done. Basically, I'm opening up the ports just a little bit, squaring them off. And to show you what it looks like, come over here to the intake and drop it on. And put this on down here. So these are the unported side. These are the ported. And run my finger in here. Look at that. That's exactly matched. Look at that. Boom. Gasket matched. Not gasket matched. Look at that big lip. Look at that. Boom. Hand gasket matched. I know you like that. It was tedious though, man. I mean, you're taking a razor and you're really cutting all this. It's a pain. Hope he appreciates this. You know what I'm saying? And just like that, snap, it is back together. Set of modified intake gaskets on it. Pretty much goes back together. Relatively simple. And the only thing I didn't like when I was putting it back together, this is the kind of the main vacuum hose that goes over here to the vacuum tree off the back of the intake. You see I got this ginormous hose. It's the only thing I had 3/8 that would fit. But you see right here, see that tear in it? I wasn't real happy about that, let's be honest. So took that crap off because, you know, details. So for now, that ginormous one's gonna be in there because it's not very flexible. If you bend it too hard, it tries to pinch it closed. So I'm gonna put that on there for now and I'll get something later, but it is 7 o'clock at night, so don't really have a lot of options right now, but you can see where the valve covers are cleaned up and nice. Everything's run and organized, back together, tightened up, looks good. Supercharger, discharge pipe, vacuum lines, throttle cable, fuel pressure lines hooked up, vacuums run across here for my ported vacuum and everything that goes to the bypass valve here, TPS sensor, so we are good. All right, we're gonna finish up this video now. Just got through with my test drive, went around, drove it for like 20 minutes just to make sure I had 0 leaks out of the valve covers. And after putting everything back together, didn't want any vacuum leaks or anything. So I drove it around, got it up temperature. Man, this thing runs nice and cool with that new radiator and the fans all wired. It got like 1 tick above 130, so like 160, 165, 170 maybe. It ran cool the whole time. Drove it in traffic, drove around town. Got on at one time, 3rd gear, made a quick hit. It was making like 14 pounds of boost. I didn't even stretch it out all the way to red line. It was making 14 pounds of boost and it was blowing the tires off. So I told Gabe, I was like, man, this car is good to go. But it rides good, sounds good, stops, you know, just does everything. This is a 100% street car now. Runs great, killer stereo, car makes phenomenal power, blows tires off of these. I went by his job on the way back. I didn't know he had got off early today to go pick up his grandson. And some of his coworkers were pulling out. So of course I had to throw up my hand and pipe them as I came by, you know, and he told me they were calling him immediately, like, hey, we saw your car. But I called him, he's gonna come pick up the car tonight. It's so much pollen here now. It's so warm for beginning of March. It's March 3rd. And the yellow pollen's already popping all the pine trees I've got around here. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's literally 70 degrees right now. So car's done, looks great. Just wanted to cap off the video. I did do a drive test just to make sure everything's good. Had 0 leaks from the valve covers that I put on, the valve cover gaskets I put on, and should be good to go.